Is this loud enough? Yeah. Okay. So I think we're right on time. Yes. All right. So I'm Nancy, and he's Phoenix. He's resetting our device right now for us, so for the demo. So I'll be doing our intro. But our talk is about the damn vulnerable habit helper IoT device, and a bit of an FYI. So we did this previously, and a few things didn't work as planned, and we were trying to avoid those this time. We'll see how that works. But yes, so we are doing this completely on a local network. We brought our own router and set up a server. We have one machine running as a server for web applications and services, and we also have, so we have our mobile, our device, everything is on our own local network because we had a network issue before when we did it. Basically,
what we had was a headless connection that had to connect to a portal that we didn't know was actually going to be there. So there was no way that we really had to automate it or anything. That, and we figured with the CTF here, there wasn't a CTF at the other place. With the CTF here, it was probably just better not to be networked.
Yeah. So yes, that was one decision we made, and we also needed to do a video or a camera replay of the hardware hacking because nobody could see it. So I'm not loud. Okay. Is this better? Okay.
I have no idea who the heckler in the back is.
All right, so we were going to do that, and also I think I'd mentioned that I was going to host this as a web application and services and do a sandbox and let everyone have their own copy, so everyone would have their own instances. That's way too expensive with even a few people of interest, so I'm asking everyone to just run it all locally, and we have all the instructions to do that, and it's not that hard. Because, yes, I started doing the calculations, and it was like, we can't afford this if we have interest. Okay, so briefly how the talk is organized. Okay, first we're going to do a brief introduction, and then we'll look at how the device works if it was a real IoT device, So if you were using it as a user, because we'll be referencing it in later slides. Then we'll talk about our architecture a bit, how to set up and use it for testing, which is different, like how to build it and how to run the applications. Then we'll go through some IoT methodology with a few tips and then do some hardware hacking. And then we have our contact info and questions last. So
last year, I spoke for the first time at any InfoSec conference. It was here, actually. And believe it or not, they invited me back. I'm just as surprised as you are. Anyhow, what we had done, we went through and did a general IoT testing methodology. We went ahead and we used a device for our example device about how we went through and worked on it. The device we used was a IoT baby monitor, so you could, look at your baby monitor over the internet. We totally didn't find anything. The device was extremely secure. Yeah, I'm lying. Anyhow, it was really great. We got a lot of excellent feedback from people. The whole experience was awesome. There were some limitations, though, that we had to do simply because of what we were doing. Since it was a purchased device, we had to deal with responsible disclosure issues. Additionally, there are some things we just didn't really want to get into because we could, open ourselves up to nuisance lawsuits, just general garbage like that.
And just want to add, and we did have issues with responsible disclosure in that, the company changed names, they didn't respond, so it was like, what can we tell you people about what we did without getting ourselves in trouble? And also, it occurred to us when we were doing this that, when I wanted to learn web application hacking better, what did I do? I actually found sample vulnerable apps that helped you walk through it and learn the basic techniques. I didn't just go out and choose somebody's website and start hacking it. So, and I was like, nobody does that for IoT devices, so you sort of have to go out and buy one, and they all are, almost all of them are gold mines for vulnerabilities. So that works really well, but still. Also, when we did this last year, Phoenix. Well, he was talking about the hardware and stuff, and go ahead.
You moved the slide before me. But one thing I noticed, like to physically connect to the device, I literally had to solder 3 wires to a debug port. This is incredibly complex. The port was conveniently labeled. One thing that came up when people were talking to me was that a lot of people seemed actually very intimidated by this. Several of the people who seemed intimidated by it, I knew personally and knew that soldering 3 wires was well within their capabilities. So it was actually something I kind of set out to do with this project, was to, just to kind of show how easy it was, because there are a lot of people, it's like they sort of psych themselves out thinking that it's harder than it actually is, and then they just never even started in the first place. And then, of course, I had this wonderful illustration to sort of show how, it worked out.
Yeah, everyone sort of thought my husband was like this for 3 wires.
A crazy guy followed around by a little caravan.
So I guess just a couple more points. Yeah, I know. We'll deal with it. Fine. A couple more points I wanted to make before we do a little bit of a demo is that we wanted our device to be similar to a real IoT device in several ways, like the general architecture. I wanted it to fit into the way NIST is defining them for security. And I also wanted it to be sort of like most IoT devices, they're sort of weird, wacky, a lot of them, and you're like wondering who in the world would buy them. So that's what I was going with. So, all right, let's see this in action. Now, as I said, there's a web app, a mobile app, and a device. So briefly, oh, you're restarting the device right now?
Unfortunately, the device got beat coming up here.
And there are 2 ways the device looks. I was just going to use it the way it was, but we have this way. If you want to go cheap and don't want to solder, you can make something that looks like this. And obviously, because this is a great board that has a breadboard on top, so you can just connect things in, and it works wonderful. Or you can have the pretty.
That won't stay on this wire, but I had this. I just went ahead and bought some. I went through Adafruit, just bought some arcade buttons, the ones that have the LEDs in them. I thought the red button looked really cool.
All right. So let's find out about what this device is supposed to do. And I didn't get these set up earlier, but
Unfortunately, in the future, I'm going to need to be better about securing things before I drive 500 miles up here.
just a sec. I was going to get these up ahead of time, but didn't quite have time. And typing with one hand is slow.
Not for me.
All right, so you have to first register an account, but first let's take a look at what the device is actually supposed to do. So tell me, how does Habit Helper work? Habit Helper works in several ways, and I'm doing this part is in both the mobile and the web app, but I think you'll see better if doing it through the web app. First, if you're feeling desperate, we have for live chat with a therapist. The discussion boards are there for less desperate times. Please click your habit resisted button when you have successfully resisted your habit. You'll get an awesome image to view, and it will up your score on the scoreboard. To keep things more even, the scoreboard only will count the first 23 clicks every day. So it's supposed to be you click a button when you have a bad habit, when you want to do it, and it's going to interrupt your habit loop in your head. And by giving you this uplifting picture, yes, and have you burst with dopamine. So
Please don't use this for any actual habits, especially if they're like heroin or anything that are really detrimental.
yeah, it's not supposed to actually work. It was just a wacky thing. Okay, so a little bit more. We'll look at the About page too, and then we'll register an account. So Habit Helper was founded by Lizzie Hayden in 2014. Lizzie has struggled with addiction to chocolate chip cookies, and after 20 years, she's now been clean from chocolate chip cookies for 90 days. She advises taking things one day at a time and remembering that no matter how bleak things look, there's always a way forward. So, yes, I amused myself with writing it. That's why I'm laughing. Let's register an account so that we can, after you have an account registered, we can configure the IoT device through the mobile app. All right, so registration, pretty simple. Username, password, confirm the password. what's your bad habit, and then a security question, which they automatically fill in, favorite David Bowie song and Life on Mars, although you can change that. All right, username. Anyone? Someone suggest one. NolaCon. We now have good choice where before, yes, choose something different. It doesn't like no. Try a longer password. Password. Doesn't like that. Best password ever.
What is the password, 1234?
Yes.
How do you keep guessing my password?
I don't know, dear. All right, so our bad habit. Unless someone has a good one, I'm going with stealing pumpkins. I think
yours? Oh.
I think stealing pumpkins is funnier than drinking tequila.
Drinking tequila builds character. That's not a bad habit.
Okay. No, let's not do that. Never. So let's just take a brief look at the web app. Log in, and you mean you want to log in? I got it. As you see, we have a forgot password button, which obviously is of interest later, but yes. This again, never. And then it takes you to a My Account page where we can check today's scoreboard. Let's see. Lizzie has clicked it 23 times. She's really resisting those chocolate chip cookies. So, this is also set up to be a independent web application, so you could do the whole thing through here. There's a different resist button in the web app, but it does warn you that clicking the physical button will produce more dopamine and increases the reward feel-good chemicals in your brain. So only click it if you don't have your IoT device. But, okay. So we can click it, and we get a rewarding picture. And we notice there's these notifications on top. So what does that do? Or we can go back to your account. Notifications are not working. That's interesting. But yes, you can update your account settings if we wanted to. Then there's the forums and the therapist. But you can look at posts. So obviously there's a comment section. This is all pretty basic. I'm not going to spend any time on the forums. Just of interest. And then the only other thing here was a therapist, and then I'll plug in the mobile app, and we'll mirror that. And you could talk to the online therapist, which, let's see if anyone gets the amusement. All right, so anyone? It's Eliza. Yes, somebody recognized Eliza. But yes, you can have fun talking to the online therapist about your problems. I did in college. All right. So let me get the mobile device plugged in and mirrored, which will just take a moment.
But yeah, Eliza's just an old chat bot that was, I think it was like one of the first chat bots that tried to be a conversational agent. But it kind of does the, was it 1970s therapist style where, I'm really angry. Well, how does that make you feel? I want to burn something. How does burning things make you feel? We're going to be using a service here to mirror the image on her cell phone. We actually signed up for a free account for it, so if there's a weird ad that comes up, you know why now. I didn't want to give them money unless I had to.
All right, sorry, just a sec.
Oh, it's because we don't have internet access. Yeah, it's not going to list it without internet access.
No, surely we can get to the apps on the Chrome without that. I'm sure there's a way. Someone, how do you get to the apps on Chrome without internet access? If it's installed as a Chrome web plugin app. Anyone?
I'm sorry, what? Yeah.
There we go. Thank you.
There we go.
All right. Now let me plug in.
There you go. Upgrade now for an ad-free experience. No.
Yep. All right. So can everyone see that? That's mirroring my screen. All right. So we will log in as our new user really quick. The other buttons are pretty much the same. Auto logs you in. So have to log out the old user. So. All right. NolaCon and let's see. Our password was yes. 3, 4. And the only really interesting part here is going to be the config, which is how we set up the IoT device. And I have paired these earlier. You do a Bluetooth pairing, but I've already done the Bluetooth pairing. And that's just your normal pairing that's outside the app even. And then you can configure the Wi-Fi of the IoT device, but it's already been done. But I'll just show you, I have this thing so you can find your paired device and then enter in your SSID and your password and then hit start configuration, and it configures the Wi-Fi on the IoT device through Bluetooth. But we did already do that, so I think we're good there. And then it will remember that always, so you don't have to keep doing Bluetooth. And then when you change the user, you have to click the configure IoT device, which is what's going to, yeah, I think I did. It'll just take a second. Yes, second update successful. Please try device. So now we can click the device several times. Go ahead and give it the clicking and okay, somehow that's a weird bug. Actually, I left that in on purpose. I remember that bug. Okay.
That was one of the problems with doing this, is that we had to set things up in a way that they were wrong, and yet they worked.
And sometimes when you found unique things that you coded not the way you expected to, you left them in because you're like, that's sort of funny. I think I'll leave that. It's sort of a security flaw. But let's see. If we check the resist button now, well, there's a resist button here too, so you can click it and get a point. So that's another one. But if we check the scoreboard, we see NolaCon has 2. We clicked the button twice, so perfect. So it is working right, dear. So awesome. That's what we expect to see. And we remember we looked originally, we didn't see NolaCon having a score at all. So that's the basics of how the device would work if you were a user. And so now let's get back to hacking. All right. But I tried to make it as amusing as possible so that you all wouldn't be bored by it.
All right. You want to switch back to slides?
Yes.
All right. Where's your clicker?
I put it down over there.
All right. There you go.
All right, so for the architecture goals, as I already said, we want to fit the standard architecture of an IoT device, as well as have all the parts that NIST defined in SP 800-183 and their draft report on that they've just put out in February. It's 183 pages. I scanned it. I haven't read the whole thing, but they're working on coming up with some standards for IoT security. And it does fit the basic architecture. I mean, this is the architecture of an IoT device right there. And yes, I'm standing on something.
Yeah, I'm wondering what that correct.
I don't know what it is. It just adds to the talk. All right, so we had the IoT device that talked via mobile to the mobile device with Bluetooth. What? Okay. And then we have both the mobile and the web talk to the cloud services, and the IoT device can also talk to the cloud services, and that's exact. So this is just a general IoT device, and it works this way. Now, as far as how NIST defines things, they have the 5 parts of the IoT device they defined. The sensor, in this case, is that physical big red button. You have to hold this thing really high. Sorry. The aggregator is the software on the device that deals with the sensor. And in this case, I'll go ahead and tell you it's a Python script. Then the communication channel, in this case, is Bluetooth and Wi-Fi. The external utilities, we have the mobile and the web app, and the decision trigger is that great picture that we saw when we clicked that button. So, yeah, it's the basically when you click the sensor, it's the what decides that what should happen. And so in this case, it's every time you click the button, it decides to show you an awesome picture and up the score.
For the hardware goals we wanted to do for this, I wanted it to be something cheap. I was going to try to also go for something that would be potentially reusable, or even better, something that you might already have. And I wanted it to be consistent. One thing, like when I was doing research on some other stuff that I was working on, there were about 15 different versions of just the main board, and all of them had like little subtle differences. Since I was putting myself out there to be available if people needed help, I wanted to actually know what it was you needed help with. I didn't want to have to try to figure out what it was I was looking at. The original idea for this, I was going to try to use an Amazon IoT button. They're cheap. They were apparently very, very hackable. The problem was, at some point, apparently, much like someone's spouse that I know, the people at Amazon hate fun. So they decided to start using ultrasonic welding on the cases. So you aren't going to, but previously, I believe there was like 4 screws or something. It was ridiculously easy to crack the things open. Now that the pieces are essentially one solid piece of plastic, you'd have to take a Dremel or something to it. You also have to know where the battery is, where the board is before you take the Dremel to it. I didn't want people like sending me death threats or anything bad from where they screwed their fingers up or went through batteries with a Dremel. So what I ended up doing, we went with the Raspberry Pi Zeros. Because again, we would know, if you had problems with something, you asked me, about it, I would know exactly what it was you were messing with. They are also cheap, reusable. But for the hardware purchasing list that you would need to build this device, you would do a Zero. You could use a non-W version, but you wouldn't have the Bluetooth access. You would also have to worry about like a dongle for it. SD card, preferably 8 gigs or bigger. You would need a momentary push button or a tactile button. Almost any of the buttons you see online that are designed to be just pushed are going to be tactile buttons. Ones that aren't tactile buttons will usually have a switch of some sort or a slide, something like that. Something that shows a permanent movement. You're going to need just a couple of jumper wires. They're ridiculously cheap, and then a power source for the Pi. Originally, I had this running on just the regular power cord that came with a can of kit for a Pi. I built one that's running off a battery currently. You also probably want, like what we touched upon last year, a separate router for any sort of testing. It's just a good practice in general if you're going to test any sort of devices. If you don't know it's sketchy, you don't necessarily want to put it on the same network as your home stuff.
You could talk a little about the difference between those, the way you could set it up here.
The original way I did this before I put it on a battery, I got this little case. It's from C4 Labs. But it had the breadboard built on there. It's very easy for when I was prototyping. So, if that's just something you decide you want to get into. The thing was like $10. It was ridiculously cheap. But we were also trying to make these where they were as inexpensive as possible, so you wouldn't really care if you hosed one, or you just wanted to get something so you could actually learn. The point of this is that it's not really a simulation of an IoT device; it's an actual IoT device. You build the device, you have it in your hands. It's pretty much the same as the experience you'd get from going out to a store, buying something, taking it off shelf, taking it home. In terms of the hardware steps, pretty easy. I mean, that was the point. We were trying to make it as simple as possible. We didn't want people to get bogged down in actually trying to get started in the first place. You would, download the image from our site. We'll put up the site address and stuff at the end of this. You'd put together the hardware, and then you would, just test it to see if it works. For the hardware layout that I went with, I did do some kind of weird things, but I actually had reasons for them. But I just went through for the button and just plugged it in on it's a physical pin 12, but it's going to be a GPIO 18. Usually those are used for PWMs, and then I went to the ground next to it. The reason why I did that was because if I wanted to do any sort of UART ports, they're the ones that are immediately next to it. I'm very lazy. I do not like having to look things up multiple times. Additionally, I'm very, very high strung, and I will look something up if I don't know it off the top of my head, even if I'm pretty sure I do know it. So I just figured I would do that. It's a place mark. In terms of setting up the web application, she'll go on to that.
All right. So this is really easy. The few requirements are you need Java 8, Apache Tomcat, and Maven are the things I'm using that you'll have to download if you don't have them.
Sorry about that. And to interject, these are what you would want to do on the test machine. The apps on the device itself will already be on the image.
Right, and everything on the device itself will start up automatically. This is to run the web application and services. You can download the code from GitHub. The score service, I've been running with Maven Jetty Run. So yeah, just choosing two different servers for running things. And for the web application, you do have to modify one configuration file. Then you can build it with Maven Clean Package, put it in the Tomcat Web Apps directory. Since the Maven Jetty Run is going to be on 8080, if it's on the same one, you'll want to change the Tomcat port in the server XML, and then just start up Tomcat using the appropriate script. And then the web app will be up. And the configuration is this one file, which I'm giving you a little bit about how it works here. But there are these two values here. One of them is an upload directory, which should be the directory of in your Tomcat, where that is basically this and whatever is your Tomcat.
Also, just to note, if you just send us an email or something, the slides actually, Adrian's usually pretty good about putting those on the video. But if you do need the slides, just be sure to contact me. I'll send them to you. I'm
going to upload them to our website. I already have a spot for it. I just haven't done it yet. And the other thing is the URL of the score service, which you can just put in the IP address if you're on a different server. In fact, that works best if it has the IP address. Okay, then setting up the mobile application. I have the APK file for the Android app. I'm thinking of doing an iPhone app, but I didn't have time. And it's easier to write Android apps than iPhone apps for me.
If somebody wants to volunteer,
Yes. And here's what I'm saying. You have to change a couple settings. Mostly the things I already mentioned, the IP address of where the service is. But yes, you can reverse engineer the application and see how to change the settings, unless you really have a problem with that. It should be really easy to find, and I don't really want to give away too much.
You have our permission. We're not going to sue you or anything like that, which, might happen if you did that with somebody else's stuff.
But if you get stuck, we will tell you, but we just don't want to ruin any fun in this talk. So testing an IoT device.
So if you're wanting to test things out in general, like what I said before, get a segregated test network. That's not what we have at home, by the way. My son would probably eat the wiring out of there. But like what we've done before, we want to go ahead and try to model what type of attacks that we want to do. You can just sort of putz around if you really wanted to, but usually I want to try to go into something with at least an idea of what I'm trying to do. And then you go in and you enumerate things, find your vulnerabilities, and go from there.
I will do it. So, all right. So there are 4 areas to test of an IoT device. At one point, I think I used to say there were 5, but I decided the web app and the API were basically the same thing and should be joined together, because I used to put those separate. But yeah, you have your mobile app, the network testing, the web apps and the API, and the hardware. So just briefly, some methodology, because we want to have plenty of time for the hardware hacking. Okay, so for the mobile app methodology for Android and iOS, do some static testing, which for Android is decompiling it. And for iOS, that's using IDA or another reverse engineering tool. Do some dynamic testing. For Android, that's mostly doing ADB stuff. Like trying to start intents that you probably shouldn't be able to, that sort of thing. Oh, yeah. Sorry. And then for iOS, a lot of times that's just using Cycrypt. And then for network testing on both of them, I always use Burp. That's my favorite web proxy. Tip here for testing things out. If you're on a Mac and if ADP cannot find your real device, try using a powered USB hub. I spent at least 3 hours, and this was what I needed to do once. It was the most annoying thing ever. So I figured I'd put it on a slide.
Yeah, I think it does put some power through, but I don't think it's enough for the device to work.
And the other thing that I spent way too much time trying to do once was getting Burp Suite to connect on an Android emulator. Set up a new APN using IP address 10.0.2.2, and it works every time for me. And that is a special IP address that represents the local host of the machine running the emulator. So
anyhow, in terms of network methodology, it's going to be the same as what you would do for a regular penetration test. You'd want to use like Nmap. You want to enumerate what your internal network is, and also observe the traffic. Obviously, you need to know what's there before you know what to target and where precisely it's at. The web application methodology is the same thing. You would just do it like you're doing a penetration test on an application. You'd go through the authentication, the authorization, the session management, check for injections, client-side code, etc. You want to do the API?
Sure. The API is very similar to the web app. You'd use the exact same tools, probably. You want to identify your API technology and enumerate all your API calls, and then I normally, at that point, start replaying things to see if I can do that, modifying replay commands, but also look for things like no transport layer security, IDOR, poor access control, that sort of thing. Sensitive data exposure. But yeah, that's the general idea.
In terms of your hardware methodology, there's not a lot of hardware to this. That's kind of the point, was to help people out so they get started in the first place. You want to, just this same as any device. Like if you bought something off the shelf, or if you were doing something, a test on a device that you were unfamiliar with, take apart the device and look at it. There is a lot of information you can gather from it. Depending on what it is, the motherboards might have a model number, which would tell you the processor and information like that. Look for debug UART ports, because you can use those for debugging. You can go through like a JTAG, and there are some other stuff that you can do for that, but UARTs, in my experience, are really, they're JTAG, you can really mess up the device. UART ports, you are very unlikely to do something that you can't undo easily, usually by just resetting the device. Additionally, unfortunately, it's anecdotal, because there's not a master list of devices out there in the world that I can consult for statistics, but UART ports are very, very common, at least in my experience. You want to see how the firmware updates. Going through UART, you can get a copy of the firmware. You check to see if you can install your own software, and does it have any sort of signing or integrity checks, something to stop some jerk from uploading a better, newer version of the firmware. For what you'd want for purchasing for hardware hacking, you want to get USB to TTL cord. It's a little device similar to this. USB on one end, obviously. TTL. There are some other types that you can get here. Full disclosure, they're all actually USB to TTL cords. I don't know why they use different terminologies for them. But the PL2303, that's made by a manufacturer called Prolific. Apparently, I'm assuming there's a patent for it that's expired since then, because you'll see third-party people making those now. USB to TTL cords, there's a chip inside the cord that controls what you're doing. And then there's FTDI, which is FTDI is an abbreviation for the company name, which is and anyhow, they've got the 232 blank series. There's a wide variety of them. They're going to be like a 232Q, 232R. Most of the ones that I personally own are 232 RLs. They make two versions of these. There's one that has 4 wires and one that has 6. I would recommend that you buy the one with 6 wires. If for anything we're doing with this device, you wouldn't actually use 6, but you want to use 6 if you're doing anything with like Arduino or some other sorts of boards, because you can use them to upload. Also, some FTDI chips, they'll have a jumper on them that can do 5 volts or 3.3 volts. You do not want to use 5 volts on our device or any Pi, as this can damage the device. When I say can, if you manage to do it and not destroy the device, please let me know, because that would be pretty funny. When you do this, there's also on the FTDI, there's a red cord. If you plug it in somewhere where it's not supposed to go, there'll be usually some sort of audible pop. There's going to be some black smoke, probably. Sometimes it's different colored smoke. And additionally, the device will not boot after that. Also, the most important thing I can tell you on doing anything with hardware, do not touch the hot end of the soldering iron, even if someone dares you. You want to know how I got these scars? If you just get bored someday, do a image search on stock photos of people using soldering irons. That is not what you're supposed to do. Unless, again, you've got some sort of thing about burning your fingers. Metal hot fire burn. Now, if you've never soldered anything before, there are a variety of kits that you can get. Most of them are only a couple of bucks so that you can practice on soldering. They'll usually have like LEDs or something like that so you can verify that it's working when you're done. Soldering is a very, like I said last year when I talked about soldering, it's a specific skill set. It's kind of like painting or drawing. Just because you have an idea in your head what you're trying to do, your hands, the soldering iron, wrath of God, etc., might not cooperate with what you're doing. So it's an easy skill. It's just like anything else. You get better at it the more often you do it. Now, do you want me to go ahead and do the hardware hacking part? All right. Now, is there somebody from the audience that would like to come up here and demonstrate this for us? Preferably somebody who has never messed with anything like this before in their entire lives. All right. Come on up here. You're the only one that raised their hand.
Exit this so that I can use the camera on my phone to put this on the screen, hopefully. That's the plan. When I say this actually broke one of the SD cards. Yeah, like it split in half. Although, you can take a look at that one on the inside if we want.
If anybody else would like to come up here, you're more than welcome to. Yeah, we tried to do this at B-Sides and nobody wanted to even try this. So, see, you're braver than those people. Now, are we getting up there on that? Oh, that's a very good shot of my shoes.
Yeah, let me move this so that it's a different shape.
All right, I'm going to walk you through this. This won't be that complex. I'm going to need to open the VM. That's the one problem with this. I'm going to have to open the VM for this.
All right. Make that probably help us move the laptop back to over there.
All right, that makes it quicker. Can we? Still be on the cable? Do I have Slack? No, I do not. Okay. All right. Sorry about this being somewhat haphazard. This is something I really wanted to show people because people get really intimidated by this, and I wanted to actually show that the base set of this is actually very simple and it's not worth worrying about. There are more complex things that you can do with hardware, of course. But if you're pulling chips out of boards and putting them into chip readers and stuff like that, then this is already kind of really elementary for what you're doing. All right, let me see my VM.
Yeah, we can. You want to explain that command?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. I get ahead of things. There's a variety of tools that you can use for this. The one I like to use is Minicom. It's I'm pretty sure it's inbuilt in Kali. If it's not, you can get it with apt-get. Anyhow, what we're going to do here is we're just going to establish terminal communications with our device. Now, Minicom, it's just like any other Linux thing. There is a help page for it. But what we're doing here, I'm guessing that we're cheating a little bit. The transmission rate, the 115200, we already know what that is because that's what Raspberry Pis are. The O is for the output screen, and then the D, the capital D, is for the device name. that if you're wondering what that is, that's going to be what COM port your FTDI connects at. So we do this. We start minicom. And what you're going to do here, there's going to be 3 wires that you connect to this. Give me 1 second here. Get this ready here. But there's going to be 3 wires that you use to connect to this. There's going to be a transmit, a receive, and a ground. Now, one thing to note, the transmit on one end needs to go to the receive on the other and vice versa. If you don't do this correctly, if you put transmit to transmit, receive to receive, you actually will get something. It'll usually be a bunch of just garble. In theory, you can get that if the wires aren't shielded properly. That's very, very unlikely. It's almost always that you just didn't plug in the right wires to the right ports. So if you have that problem, reverse transmit and receive. In this case, the reason why I did the pin settings the way I did, sorry, I just moved it out of there, is we already know that we're going to plug something into those 3 right there. And it's already labeled too. Like I said, I was trying to make this as easy as possible for people. You want to put those in that second row, right next to these. Mm-hmm. All right, what's your name, by the way? All right, thank you, Ryan. Give me 1 sec here. And see, that blue one is going to be our ground. The yellow is transmit, and the green is receive. But what we do is we would do this while the device is powered off. This
is the old version of the device, which is on the playing power as opposed to the battery. So we plug it in.
It was easier to do it this way. Yeah, switch back to the VM. And something is not connected, or we should pull something out. Okay, hold the mic for me for a second.
Yeah. So this is how these things work with hardware. Sometimes I see a light now blinking.
It didn't connect to the VM.
All right.
We're going to reset this here.
Sometimes you have to jiggle the wires, reset it a couple times, but be patient, try it a couple times.
The other thing, too, is when you're doing this technique, what you're going to need to do sometimes. Did the light just go off? I'm unplugging this somehow since I'm stretching these cables out. But on some devices, what you'll just need to do is that you're going to just, some of them you'll actually interrupt the boot. If it's like a U-boot device, you can, there's a way to just interrupt the boot while you're doing it, and it'll drop you into root.
All right. I don't see a light.
Don't tell me I shorted this thing out.
Oh. I didn't see any smoke, which at least you sometimes see with a short.
Well, yeah, normally I take out the soldering iron too when it smokes. It doesn't just happen while I'm touching something usually.
Well, my lab partner in college was very good at making things smoke with just connecting wires. She always messed up the ground. This was for digital logic class. She would always mess up the ground wires. And yes, we had so many. I just saw it flash.
Yeah, unplug your phone. Yeah, unplug your phone. You're interfering with it.
Okay.
I think we just had too many things connected to it, and it was killing it wasn't getting enough power. Is the light flashing now?
Not right now. No. This worked all of about an hour ago in the downstairs. We only tried it once today, but it worked. First time. There's the light. And then it goes off.
That's fine.
Well. Come on, you. Okay, yes. And okay, so always check the power cord. That should be another tip on the slides. I see the green light on the device, so I think it is on. And if this fails, then
if this fails, we're just gonna skip it. Yeah, it's from me disconnecting it from here. But yeah, what you're doing is you're trying to get it while it's booting so that you can interfere with the boot process. On some devices, like U-boot devices, you can stop it while it's actually doing the boot process and drop yourself into a shell depending on the device. Okay, let's see. Yeah. Well, unfortunately, here, let me take a look at this. You're fine.
Oh, we got it. It's boot. Just took a while to boot.
Sorry about that. It's just, yeah, unfortunately, I'm going to have to come up with a better way to transport this stuff. There's actually a wire that's loose there. Thank you very much, Ryan. You did awesome. Please give Ryan a hand. I was going to say how this is really simple, and now I feel like kind of a jerk saying that. But
simple in its way, obviously. As you can see, it wasn't a lot to do. You just have to get it all right.
And while this isn't really that advanced of a tactic, the whole thing is that by doing this, you've established communications with the device. Once you've established communications with the device, you can then start performing attacks on it. Oh, you want me to show this?
Yeah.
Those ports here, those are the three that we had Ryan connect to, the UIRTs there. And again, that's why I put the button wires where I did, was so I wouldn't have to look every time to see where I put them. I'm not going up here.
Oh, we unplugged everything?
Oh, no, I didn't do that one on purpose. It's when I moved the notebook. So anyhow, for a conclusion, for what I wanted to work on next year is the bathroom buddy. It's going to be an IoT-enabled device. I figure that this would be like the sort of thing that, you might see this on Amazon someday. If he does it first, be sure to vouch for me in court. But anyhow, here's our contact information. If you guys do decide to do this, or if you just have any sort of feedback, please don't hesitate to send me an email. You can send her an email too. One of us is a little bit better at checking emails and responding to them than the other one. I know. But also, the website that we are hosting everything at is insecuredevices.com. So if you go there, you can get the disk image for everything and any instructions that you have.
You can get them Tuesday. Because some of it's up right now, some of it's not. We're going to finish up putting up the slides and all the instructions by Tuesday. Because, yes, we were still updating some of this stuff for the way we redid it. So everything will be updated by then.
Also, after we had everything updated, we were going to talk to SciDef, the people who are doing the CTF. So some of the stuff might also be mirrored over there.
Some of it's already up. So depending on if you just want to grab like the GitHub and the APK, that's there. That sort of stuff. But if you want like the slides, that's not there yet.
But were there any questions? Again, I'm really sorry about that. Unfortunately, trying to take things in a car apparently wasn't the best idea. But did anybody have any sort of questions or anything? Oh, so, yeah, you in the back there? I was going to do that, but unfortunately, we also have a 1-year-old, and I just didn't get around to soldering that much stuff. He's very, very interested in when I'm using a soldering iron, but I really don't like having him around when I'm doing that. Apparently, I'm really fun to climb on while I'm soldering things. Just a little note for everybody. And I thought there was somebody over there. Yes, ma'am. Oh, yeah. I heard at least 2 talks yesterday where somebody said, "Oh, well, I'm not going to do a demo because that's incredible, like a live demo because that's incredibly stupid." Yeah. But no, I mean, we had to pack everything along with a stroller and a crib and all that too. And unfortunately, I apparently ended up putting the crib on top of some stuff. Yes. But thank you very much, everybody. I know that it's a lovely day and there are other things that involve drinking you could be doing instead of spending your time here with us. So, again, if you have any questions or comments, you can either hit us up at the party or here or whatever, or send us emails. All right? Thank you very much.